Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Jesus Talks. For this week's episode, we have another special guest with us today. Some of you guys might know him, some of you guys may not. But if you know who Eric Tapoya is, you know who this is. So let's welcome Anthony into the studio today. Anthony, thank you so much for taking the time to do this and to be here with us. So why don't we just get the ball rolling? Just let us know, who are you? What do you do?
Yes, thank you, Jesus Talks family. I am someone who is just focused on sharing the faith. A priest actually just said recently is like, oh, you obviously don't know how to be anything but Catholic. And he was kind of criticizing me because I don't fit in with a lot of people in this world or I don't have a lot of friends. But I kind of took that as a compliment because, I'm just living the Catholic faith and doing my best to survive out here. So I do have a radio show through his wounds that is every Monday on Virgin Most Powerful Radio. And we live stream that at 10 a.m. every Monday. And that's through his wounds. Check out my co-host YouTube channel, Seeking Sainthood, and that's where we interpret the world through the wounds of Christ. So again, it's just remaining in that Catholic identity.
Okay. And then, so we're obviously going to get into your testimony. So, um, do you want to explain to us like how deep you took your faith before?
Yeah, so at a young age, it's funny. My family took me and my brothers to Mexico, and I received Holy Communion and confirmation, and went to confession all on the same day. And it was kind of like something we did, which was pretty scandalous because we did it when I was 7, and my little brother was 5 when he had all his sacraments. And not a lot of people, go to confirmation when they're 7 or 5. But in the old days, that's apparently what used to happen. And actually, right after I went, Cardinal Mahoney at the time caught word of it, and he was saying things like, "Oh, you shouldn't." He tried to get the whole thing shut down because there was one mom who was taking a bunch of moms and a bunch of kids every single year to the Mexico to get confirmed and Holy Communion, and they were skipping out on all the classes here in the LA diocese. So Cardinal Mahoney was getting upset about that apparently, and he canceled it. So all my brothers and one sister, were confirmed Holy Communion and confession. Obviously, we had to put those three together, all within, you know, 24 hours in Mexico. And it was a wonderful thing because it kind of helped me realize I feel like I got a little bit of extra grace going up through school, being able to survive all the secular criticisms of our faith, of the true church. And you don't see how often it comes by until later on and you reflect and like, oh, that person was actually attacking the faith. But it all started at a really young age for me. So I attribute my awakening, my quickening, my Holy Spirit coming upon me to my sacrament of confirmation, as it should be. But today I always say, everyone tries to live out their baptism. Even the Protestants say, are you baptized and saved? Have you been baptized and saved? Well, yes, I've been baptized and saved, but I've also been anointed with holy oil, and then that fire of the Holy Spirit now dwells inside me, and I'm called to go out and evangelize and serve. That's what living out your confirmation is. The problem with the church today, I think not a lot of people are living out their confirmation.
Yeah. So, would you say like growing up cradle Catholic, like obviously you got to experience it at a much younger age. Do you feel like that caused any problems in the future, like in your faith, or were you just immediately, would you consider yourself immediately kind of just devout or curious when you started to get all these sacraments done?
Well, I kind of had to be devout because I was an altar server. So realizing if we truly believe that that is the body of Christ, and from a young age, driving by every chapel, every church, and blessing ourselves, okay, and why would we do that? Obviously, we would ask why. And it was because the King of Kings, Lord of Lords is present in that tabernacle. And just as you were to pass by a king and bow to them out of respect, you do the same thing when you make the sign of the cross, is you let him know that he's the one ruling your life. And then we can talk about what is the sign of the cross, one of the oldest creeds ever. Justin the Martyr, I think it was his feast day just recently, and he is quoted to say that he's the first one quoted to make the sign of the cross. We mark ourselves in the sign of the cross. And that is just to say that everything we do is in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. And that's kind of what Paul was writing about too in the scriptures when we say like through him, with him, and in him, in all things. That's how we should be living. There's two realities I realize in this world is that you can either be serving God or serving the devil. We always heard about good and evil, but at the same time, I also learned about St. Michael and the devil. Okay. So we knew there was like a spiritual reality. And, one thing that always stuck with me is at a young age, someone was like, alien just means not of this world. And I was like, okay, you're right. Okay, even if aliens outer space don't exist, okay, but aliens exist because there are things that are not of this world. And Father John Hardin, who a lot of people way back when probably know because he was an EWTN priest, um, he would say that when someone calls something nonsense, you have to watch out what they say because a lot of things are nonsensical, like the spirit. Okay, there's a lot of, I've always realized that even from a young age, there's always more to something. The moral value of an act, of any moment, choosing what to do in any situation is that we have a choice. I feel like that was really important for us to understand that it is a good versus evil, and we are the main characters here.
And so, what would you say to those who are considered lukewarm? Because obviously, you said like you either serve one, like I know the Bible talks about it, like you either serve one
Hmm.
master or you serve the other. You cannot serve two masters at the same time. But there are people who would be considered lukewarm, who would just be like, well, I'm sort of into the faith, but not that into the faith. So I guess I'm good. What would you
Yeah.
say to them?
No, I mean, it takes constant effort, and it is difficult to not let our minds slip because it all comes down to what's going on within ourselves. A lot of people like to live outside themselves. We watch TV, we watch reality shows. I get guilty of watching reality shows because they're funny. But at the same time, how much time do we spend within ourselves? How much time can we actually like spend in silence? And a lot of days today, silence is hard to come by. So for those who feel like you're lukewarm or you feel like maybe you don't have that motivation, turn everything off and where does your mind go? Okay, because that's where you're going to find out what's ruling your life, what you're thinking about, what is coming to mind when you're not thinking of anything. That's what it means to take custody of the mind, is when we fill those things with the things of the spirit, the things of God. When we say the morning offering, when we say our midday prayers, when the alarm bell goes off at noon and we say the Angelus or the Regina Celli, those are the things that we do to guard our mind so that when we are in silence. We don't hear any noise, okay? And the noise of the world that is always dragging us down and drawing us away from God, definitely the culture has not been pulling us towards God, okay? It's not like we've been getting any more conservative or any more religious. No, instead, we've been getting more progressive and more liberal with things, the way we express ourselves. Instead, we should be focusing on how can we sanctify each moment, okay? And that's what it means. I think being lukewarm and a result of lukewarm Catholics is this culture that we currently live in today. Because if we had that fire within us, if we had that calling of truth, the knowledge of the truth, to actually see the errors that were going on in the culture, the little slippery slopes, because it didn't just happen overnight, right? This has been going on since, I mean, we were learning since the 1940s, right? Okay. The Bolshevik Revolution, liberalism was started 1920s. Let's take it back. Okay. Even further, the further I go, the more further back I'm realizing, oh, it started over here. Oh, it started over here. It's just because that is the fall. Okay. Things are going to get worse. Things have been getting worse since the fall. That's why, we're not in the garden. Okay. This is kind of like a purgatory. This is our suffering. Can we suffer here on earth? Yes. Okay. And everyone's going to suffer. I don't know. I'm going on a tangent. But you think you're the only one you have to suffer? No, we all suffer. So what do? We unite that suffering, um, and take every single moment and unite it to Christ because that's the only way it makes anything matters because this life is temporary. We're planning for the life to come. Uniting it to Christ means uniting it to the eternal Father, to the eternal truth. And do your best to do that and sanctify every moment. You're not going to be able to do that, okay? It's because we're human. We're all going to get caught up in the world. We're all going to get caught up in sin and things that are just funny, okay? But be careful, and we should always have our guard up as much as we can.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest thing that's really been affecting, especially now within just anybody, just any Christian, is like not only with the things of the world, but it's also mainly like social media specifically. Because now it's like, oh, you can do this and it's not going to be that bad. Like for example, right now, like it's very common for people to mess up marriage in a very twisted way where it's like, oh, you can sleep with as many people as you want without a commitment, or you can live with people without being married to the church first or without being married legally and all that stuff. And it's just everything is starting to get really twisted and we forget what the values are, especially as Christians. We forget what does the Bible actually say about it. And a lot of people think the Bible is like a rule of books. And I'm like, I
Mm.
think of it as a path to holiness. Really, I'm like, because 'cause we're not called to live this world for ourselves, and, like, people say, like, "Oh, you could just do whatever your heart desired." The heart is deceiving, actually. Your emotions are deceiving, actually. Not everything that looks good is good for us, and I think a lot of us forget that.
Divinity is the one that lets us choose, and the devil is the one that keeps us in our prison. So when we're ruled by our emotions, when the first thing that comes up, or comes to mind, or the first initial thought that we say, that's, that may not be necessarily your thought, okay? But we have a choice then and there to correct it or to decide whether to continue in that thought. And okay, it's like I said, it's a battle and it's a process. We have a choice, and realizing that we have a choice is going to be very key, I think, for anyone trying to grow in the faith.
And then, would you say that it's more difficult now the way that you see things, is it more difficult now for men to practice their faith than women?
Um, you know, it's depends on who you're with and what's popular within your group, okay? Because in some instances, the guys are the ones trying to discover, like, Donald Trump was a great thing that happened. Got a lot of people talking about politics, and you could see who kind of was able to figure things out. COVID was a great test for people. So were we able to decipher that and all that? Um, and just everyone's opinion on that. The great thing today, I think, is that it's so partisan that one if someone gives you one stance on any issue, on any one issue, and you know what they believe on everything else, because that's just how people are working now. So either you're Republican or Democrat, or you're either conservative or you're either anti-religious or super religious. There's no in between nowadays. It's because everyone is throwing themselves into whatever identity that they can find. And if you happen to find a Christian identity, great. Make sure it's not for the sake of community, but make sure it's for devotion of God. And we're telling anyone out there who's struggling with identity, and if you are a cradle Catholic and you think, oh, like I'm falling away cradle Catholic, and I don't go to church anymore, or maybe I'm just a spiritual person and I don't need religion. You do, because, that is Christ physically here on earth. The priest is Christ. And when he's performing those sacraments, you get to see something that has been going on for 2,000 years. When Christ took the bread, gave it to his disciples, and said, that's something that's been passed down from generations, years, thousands of years. The fact that we get to participate in that and have that portal to Calvary, what the Mass truly is, realizing the Holy of Holies and God is with us in the tabernacle. We can't forget those things, and it makes it hard to walk away once we realize that the King is present in the tabernacle.
And I think not even I start to realize, like, not a lot of Catholics know what's going on in the mass. They are just going through the motions, and it's really bad because, like, for example, like, I grew up in a Mexican American household. My entire family, like, they were all born in Mexico, but And, like, yes, like, the mass was super essential for us to kinda go, but it was more of just, like, an obligation thing because that was what they were accustomed to, but it's like, what is actually happening up there? Are we actually paying attention in mass? Are we actually believing in our hearts that when we take it, this is truly the body and blood of Jesus? And it's like for a lot of Catholics specifically, I noticed, like, it's very hard for them, and that's why a lot of them tend to stray away to Protestant churches or just, turn away from the faith because they don't know what it means. They don't know what it stands for. They don't understand like what is actually happening.
Yes,
And
and
so what would you say to people who
that's a benefit I think I had of being in travel basketball and literally found ourselves every different weekend at a different parish. And because at the same time I was an altar server and I served at a really good Novus Ordo parish where we had patsons, where we only had boy altar servers on Sundays. And later on, this parish would go in and put in altar rails and just become more traditional, I guess, more ordinarily Catholic. So, and then traveling to other parishes that aren't necessarily the same way. Thank you, Vatican II. And just seeing all little things, it's hard not to judge them, right? Because you get mad like, oh, why is the priest wearing flip flops? Or like, why isn't the priest wearing pants? Like you could tell he's at least he's wearing shorts because I don't know. And then afterwards, you know, you're seeing people. I'll give you one example. We came back to a parish because we had moved from this area. We came back to the parish and saw a, a nun or a sister who was at the time a teacher at the school. They got rid of the nuns as teachers, and she was habitless now. So anything can go wrong at a parish, and you always have to be aware. But seeing all those different things again, it just shows you as much as you see all the errors, as much as you see all the goofy stuff that goes on, you know what's right. You know what you should be doing. And then seeing my dad go up and boldly take communion on the knees with his tongue out every single time and then sometimes be denied that, be denied like the priest would get upset and tell him to get up. The priest would tell him not to do that. And he would have to go outside at the end of mass and talk to the priest and be like, why wouldn't you let me receive on the knees? And, there was an animosity towards traditionalism outside the church and an animosity towards traditionalism within the church. Okay, so we always had a choice and then life was always about choices. I don't know. I'm just realizing this.
and what's crazy is the fact that my friend and I we went to a retreat recently and the priest actually told us, which we knew was wrong.
Let's go.
He was
What
like
was it?
he said, oh, by the way, you don't have to kneel when you take the Eucharist because the angels up in heaven already are on their knees, so there's no reason why we need to do that. My friend and I were looking at each other like, "What?"
It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and we were kinda wondering, like, did he use as an excuse to maybe try to hurry it up because there's a lot of people. It was an all women's retreat or, like, there was, like, over 100 women there. I was like, "Maybe he wasn't trying to take that long." I'm like, "He could have at least just said, 'Hey, we're trying to speed this up a little bit.'" But, like, we're thinking maybe that's why, but or I don't know because he was a priest from, like, out of the
Yeah,
country, and we just thought it was really weird because the week before that, our priest actually gave a talk at our church, and one of his homilies was telling us, "You have the choice to either receive it through the hand or receive it on your tongue, or you can receive it standing or on your knees." So then the next week, we go to this retreat, and then all of a sudden, they're telling us, "Hey, you don't have to do that," and we're looking at each other like, "This is crazy." Like, this is
right.
crazy. For me, I like taking it on the tongue. I don't like touching it just because I'm just like, I'm like, that's if I'm really in believing that this is Jesus, why would I wanna touch him? Like,
You're right.
I am not worthy. So I was like,
And
I
apparently you're not supposed to chew either. You're supposed to let it dissolve and just swallow it. You ever think about that one?
no, I didn't know that. So
Yeah, I don't know. It's just nothing is more confusing than our own church because of all the different rules and all the different standards within the churches. Like you said, people were leaving to Protestant churches, and it comes to the like your community and are you going to church for community? Because a lot of people tend to do that. And when you find a better community with a more on fire emotional appeal, right? Because Protestant churches have always been emotionally appealing because they read the Bible, like I gets you fired up, and they play some good music and they send you home. Whereas we have to wait for our priest to do the consecration because he's being transformed himself and it takes a long time. Sometimes we get worried about how long the mass is going for. Bishop Strickland literally stands there with the host elevated for like a good 2 minutes, and then he does it for the chalice, and it's really reverent, but people don't have the time for reverence anymore. There was one time I was serving mass, and the priest told me because he knew it was a Laker playoff game, and he said, "I'm gonna go extra long today," and I was like, "Father, do you?" And but yeah, just the benefit of being within the parish. At the time, I had to go to the Adoration Chapel, so I would bike to the basketball courts, play basketball, wash up as best I could, and then use the code to go to the Adoration Chapel. People would always ask me why. My parents asked me why I do that because they never asked me to do that. Then they thought it was weird, and it just felt like proper to do. If I'm going to spend all this time playing basketball, I'm dedicating like a lot to it. I would try to get like 1,000 shots and like 2,000 dribbles. I would just pound it and shoot away. And it would take a couple hours. If I'm spending all this time, might as well, spend time with the Lord because that was my priority. That's what everyone's priority should be. We are creatures of the Creator. You know, that's what I guess Confessions of a Cradle Catholic is make sure he's a priority in your life, and the more priority he is, the more the less worry you'll have because you can trust him with anything.
And I think I'm seeing that now a lot of people are turning to Jesus, which I think is beautiful. But and it's really curious because like even now specifically for women, I'm starting to see a lot of women start veiling again, which is beautiful. And it's just and you know what? It does bring back to the point of where you're saying, like, yes, like Protestant churches, they have a lot of more emotional stuff. People like it because it seems like a I literally had somebody tell me, like, I love my church because it feels like a concert every single time. And I'm like, that's not what it's supposed to be about. I'm
Yeah.
like, but and it's like it's to hype you up and you get that Jesus high. But it's like that Jesus high doesn't last very long once you get out of there. And it's like, and you're wanting more and more and more and more. But it's like, but when you actually start to evaluate, it's like, are you actually forming that relationship with Jesus? How much are you actually taking? Are you only dancing and singing? Like nothing bad with it, but it's like there are times where he doesn't just want to hear from us. He wants to speak to us. And I feel like Protestants kind of get that wrong, I think, in that sense, because you're like, you're not giving him time to speak to you, you know?
Yes, and they always say like I've been saved, and you're living in that glory of being saved, and sometimes it's a trap because we feel like we're on a really high level when really spiritually, we don't really know anything about the faith. The Confession of a Cradle Catholic again is like we have to go our lives just accepting the truth kind of, and we don't really know the basis behind it. And if you're not curious about it, then you ought to be because you're going to get challenged on this in life. And the Protestants will always just say, like, oh, as long as you know Jesus and have a personal relationship. But what does that relationship look like? Again, it's going to come from within. And are we doing an examination of conscience? Are we evaluating the things that we've done, the things that just like, okay, the Protestants are going around all hunky dory, but they don't even check on the demons that are on their shoulder. We as Catholics are always looking around every single corner. They're like, oh, you're so obsessed with sin. Well, kind of. One of the biggest criticism is that Catholics are too obsessed with hell, but we're not obsessed with hell. We're just like obsessed with separation from God because we want to be completely unified with him and unified with him in all his glory. And the only way to live in glory is to unify with him. And what did he do? How does he live his life? Do we go out and make money and be rich and look every possible way to like overcome people in any kind of world, like the physical world, business world, whatever world you're living in? How do we influence people? We influence them with charity and with grace. And it says in the gospel, evangelize them and with your actions, and if necessary, use words. Okay, so you should always be that light of Christ. If your friends don't know that you are that light of Christ, and if you're not the person that they come to for answers when they have like spiritual questions because they can read it off you, I don't know how it happens, but my friends are always hitting me up with weird questions. Just the other day, someone was like, "So, when do you think the Great Awakening will happening?" Because a lot of people are waking up nowadays. And I'm just like, what is this great awakening anyway that you're talking about? So if you're not getting questions like that, then people don't know you. People don't know that you're a Catholic, and that's a problem. People ought to know that you're living out the faith. People ought to know that you can come to that they know I'm resourceful. Okay, so I'll get them an answer if I don't have it. So I think that's important.
Yeah, it's funny because I was hearing a talk the other day when they were saying when somebody meets you, can they tell that you're Catholic without you having to tell them that you're Catholic or Christian?
Hmm.
Or are you gonna get the response of, "Oh, I didn't even know you were a Christian." Like, dude, that would suck. If somebody told me they're like, "I didn't even know you were a Christian," then you're doing something wrong at that point because you really gotta think to yourself and you really gotta be like, "This is a problem. If my actions are not if the way that I'm living my life, if it's not representing Christ, if people are not curious about it, then that's a really huge issue." And I think that's what a lot of Catholics right now, like, and it's funny because I think of Eric so much when he's constantly on me about, like, practice your faith, live it out." As annoying as it can get sometimes when he tells me, like, I love it when he tells me that though, because I'm like, dude, it's true. Like, I need to be pushed more to that level. I'm like, we need to be pushed more as Catholics. Like, why are we just going along with the motions of it? There is no point in living a life of the motions with that. You gotta be able to actually live it. Are you able to defend your faith as well? I think that's also another thing. It's like, okay, like if you're saying that you're Catholic, you have to also know why do we do things and why do we believe things? Why do we believe these certain things? So if somebody comes up to you and you're like, "Hey, I have a question about this." I get questions all the time, and if I don't know an answer, I'm the same way. I will get them an answer, but it's like if I'm not living the life that Christ wants me to live, none of these people would be coming at me trying to ask me all these different questions.
Yeah,
And it's just like I feel like as Catholics we've turned so lukewarm, and that's why I used it earlier. It's like we turned so lukewarm that like very few people are actually living out their faith and actually representing what Catholicism is. Because at that point, everybody kind of just wants that title. We're very good at using titles that we're not actually even like we're
yep.
not even living out those titles. So it's like, what's the point?
It feels good to get dressed up and go to church and then go out afterwards in our fancy church clothes and look good and feel good and all that. But what does it mean to be Catholic? The problem with the church today is that we don't have enough Catholic people. We got a lot of people in the Catholic Church, okay? I understand that. Got a lot of people coming into the faith. Apparently, this is the year where of a record-breaking number of adult baptisms. Great, a lot of people are coming to Jesus. That's awesome. But how many people are actually Catholic? Catholic, I mean, they participate in the sacraments, meaning you frequent confession, you go to the mass on Sunday, and if you can go during the week, then you're attending. And if you can't go during the week, you're kicking yourself in the butt because you're like, darn it, like why does my job allow me to go during the week? If I could just squeeze it in during lunch, maybe. Okay, but the point is we're struggling with it. And I think a lot of people today don't want to struggle with their faith. Okay, and that's what it means to be Catholic. So if we had Catholic parents who knew their faith, then we would have proper sex education where without sex, we can't have sex without marriage, okay? Because those two things go together, okay? And if we had Catholic kids, then we'd have Catholic schools, okay? Because the kids would be telling the parents, like, hey, my school's talking about this, my school's talking about that. Um, and we're seeing a little bit of that, but we didn't see it before just 5 or 6, let's say 10 years ago. We didn't see it because it is coming through incrementalism. Now their whole agenda is out in the open, so it's clear as day for everyone. But why weren't we seeing it before? We were asleep at the wheel too. Okay, the Catholics, they didn't have their alerts. Their spidey senses weren't tingling, I guess, and all this stuff was able to be crept in. They gave you these enemies, like I always say, they gave you these enemies like homosexuality and wokeism, but these are the enemies that they gave you. You can't forget that that is your friend over there. And it's not wokeism, it's not homosexuality that's corrupting them. It is something spiritual. So what do you need to do? You can't convince them with any words. You need to pray for them. You need to fast for them. When was the last time anyone out there has made a fast for the conversion of their friend who is hardened of hearts? How powerful ought that ought to be. This is what the saints relied on,
Yeah,
fasting.
yeah, and, like, I know that this month specifically I know we're gonna get into a little bit of a touchy subject, but I don't care. Exactly. Like we know what this month represents for the world. We know they do it as pride, and I think and I was thinking about this last night and I was like, it's funny that it's Pride Month. I'm like, but literally one of the capital sins is pride.
Yeah.
So,
Do you
and
think they're thinking about that? I think it's like
absolutely.
they're brainwashed. They're not even paying attention. And if we cut them off, which a lot of people do, which a lot of Catholics would do, which would we ought to do, okay? We not best not to let them in your home for sure. But if we can foster a relationship and really gain change, you know, or show them that there is something different out there. Everyone's always like, why are you walking around so happy? Even people at work, where I work at a Catholic radio station, everything was going wrong on the technical issues. And I was over there trying to fix everything. I showed up on camera and I was smiling, trying to fix everything while everything's going haywire. And my coworker on the walkie-talkie was like, I'm glad you're smiling through all this. It was like, how are you going? How are you smiling through this? And it's just, excuse me, carry this joy because at the end of the day, I wish I could turn my camera, but it's too far away. But Christ is right there hanging out to remind us that these sacrifices that we make throughout the day, those little inconveniences, nothing really matters, okay? Too blessed to be stressed, honestly, because as long as I'm alive, as long as I'm kicking, God's given me an opportunity, and He wouldn't be thinking about me if I wasn't alive. So I know He's thinking about me. I know He loved me, and He died for me. So those are the sacrifices, and He took upon the sins of the world. Heavy was that sacrifice, carried the cross, and that must have been pretty bad after being scourged at the pillar. That's those are real sufferings. The things that go about day to day, they don't really matter. Okay, they're gonna pass. This sacrifice was eternal. Must focus on that one.
And I think a lot of people forget that Jesus was Jesus. Like even when he died up on that cross, when he was up on that cross, he could have went down and he could have showed everybody what he could do. I mean, it literally would not have costed him anything. But it's also like he's showing us like, hey, like despite knowing who I am and what I can do, I'm gonna show y'all what needs to actually be done in this situation. Because at the end of the day, he could have been like, "Oh, really? Like y'all don't believe that I'm the son of God? Let me go down and let me show every single one of y'all." He could have thought that he was better than anybody else, but guess what? Even though what's funny is the fact that like he was better than everybody else. He was the best. He was the best of the best, but yet he never bragged about it. He never went cocky about it. He never had an ego about it. Like he was
Moment of
always very
pride.
humble, was always a submission under God's will. Always in submission. And I mean, look how things have turned out after his beautiful sacrifice that he gave us up on that cross. And not a lot of people like to think about it. A lot of people are like, oh, yeah, he died for us. But I'm like, but do you know what that actually means that he died for us?
Hmm.
Are we living the life like we know that Jesus actually died for us for our sins?
Amen. And
Like,
we're reminded every time we go to mass, and that's why we say prayers before mass. That's why we say prayers after mass. We say prayers after we receive communion. The mass is one big prayer preparation. When nothing really. I know the homilies are great, but nothing really starts until the priest says, "Brethren, pray that my sacrifice and yours be acceptable to God, the Almighty Father," because this is the moment of where everything's about to go down. And no matter how goofy your church is, if you can't make it to a good parish, my parents used to drive me over an hour to go to St. Peter Chanel, where Father Ed Broom, people will know him if you don't know who that is. I would go get catechized over there at his parish because that was a good parish. My parents would take that effort to go and drive me over there. But if you're not getting good catechesis, if you're not getting it from your own parish and you can't go to another parish far away, remember that the consecration during the Mass is always the same. Those words need to be spoken in order for it to be a Catholic Mass. And you will always be able to participate in Calvary, in the Eucharistic sacrifice. That is what we lean on as Catholics. That is the one truth that I always knew to be true. Um, you know,
it's the
Preparing
same in
for
every
mass.
language too.
Yes,
It's the same
yes,
in every
exactly.
language. So
Yeah, and I want to mention one more thing. Preparing for mass. My dad would always tell us as kids every single time, no matter what, he would always tell us what the mass is and talk about Christ and his passions. And he would sometimes break down into tears. Sometimes he would be able to compose himself, but it was always something magical, always something mystical, and it was a reality that we definitely realized.
Yeah, and I think it's really sad that we don't realize how blessed we actually are as Catholics. I'm like,
Mhm.
sometimes I think to myself, like, man, I'm like, Protestants are really missing out on this because I'm like, and it's so sad to see that, you know? 'Cause I'm like, if y'all really knew who was up there, like y'all would be running. Y'all would be running every single day. And
Yeah.
even Catholics, if they truly knew what that meant, those churches would be filled every single day. Oh, well, yeah, if those, parishes offer daily mass, but, you know, and it's just it blows my mind out, but I've been seeing a lot of, especially younger people, like, around my age, I'm 24. I see a lot of people now, there's, like, a huge revival, I feel like, when it comes to Jesus, especially when it comes to the Catholic faith. I've been seeing a lot more people are so into, like, the apologetic side of things. A lot of people are into the history side of things, and it's beautiful to see that. I don't know how you see it, but
It's a crucial moment. Okay. Now is our time as those cradle Catholics. Now is your moment to really show your stuff. Okay. Because they're going to need guidance. They're going to need to know what it's like to live out their faith, praying your daily rosary, not getting upset at someone who's not living their faith. They're going to have to learn that one because for a long time, I'm sure we were all getting upset and we have to realize that people have to live their lives too. Okay. And then making sure that we're tactical with the arguments that we choose. Okay. So we can't just go out guns a blazing with the faith, I'd say. We live it out in our sleeves, but when it comes to argument's sake, we have to be very smart, which is why I have a lot of Catholic one-liners. I said one earlier, you can't talk about sex without talking about marriage because those two go hand in hand. One of my one-liners for gun rights is, okay, you don't want to talk about gun rights, talk about defense rights. Okay, the right to defend yourself. Don't talk about guns. And I'm trying to see here. You can't talk about global warming unless you talk about the government owning patents to manipulate the weather. There's over 1,000 something patents on geoengineering. It's a real thing that's going on. We should talk about that before global warming. Abortion is always a good one. I got a few. It says abortion is safe and legal, but no one is safe during an abortion. Okay, trust me. And then one thing is if they say like, oh, we can't tell what it is until there's a heartbeat. But we can tell what it is because what came before, and the great thing about music is when you hear the first couple notes of a song, you automatically know what the entire thing is going to look like. Okay, if we have the elements of the makings of a human being, we kind of already know what the entire thing is going to look like. When it comes to sin, if someone doesn't understand the reality of sin, this one's more for my Protestant friends. I say, well, what kept the original saints out of heaven? See, if Jesus had to die for our sins, you know, something that was there that was keeping them out of heaven. Why couldn't they just go straight to heaven if they already accepted God? Okay. No, it's because there are sins there. It needs to be a purification, which leads me to my next one liner. Purgatory. You can't talk about purgatory. If you want to talk about purgatory, you have to talk about time after death. Okay. Is there anything going on after death? Is this bodily experience all that we have? Or are we moving on to the next phase? So I actually wrote these down. Okay. A lot of people don't have to write them down. A lot of people have them off the top of their head. A lot of people, because when you're in a relationship with your friends, which is why I don't break off relationships with people, which is why we were talking about this, I think. Relationships are important because you're going to understand what's going to hit them most. These are the truths that have revealed themselves to me because these are the ones that I've been dealing with. Okay. I need to write something down for proof of the existence of God because someone was challenging me that God doesn't even exist. I have a really long explanation, but I haven't cut it down to just a couple lines where I'm able to get him like tactically. Okay, if I were to sit there and explain away the argument, yeah, I'm sure he'd get it. But do I have 40 minutes? Do I have an hour? I don't think so.
yeah. So another question. I know some people were also asking me online. They're like, so let's say you consider yourself a Catholic, cradle Catholic in this sense. and then you're starting to learn more about the faith and you're starting to really grow into it, do you have to agree with every single thing that the Catholic Church teaches to be an actual Catholic?
Amen. That's important because there's are going to be some things that you don't understand. Like right now, honestly, to be honest with everyone, I got issues accepting incorruptible bodies because have you seen them? You know, they're a little I don't know because one of them is like, oh, he's incorruptible, but we got a metal mask on his face just to keep him a little bit more preserved. So it's like, wait, what's going on? But again, those are true miracles. Okay, they're actually real. Whatever it is, I don't know. But that's my point. It's like I'm telling you those are real. And the saints are incorruptible. Why? Because the church says so. Okay, I don't understand it. That's just what it is. That's whatever their explanation is. I'm sure they got one. Okay, but
You just
you
haven't
do
found it
have
yet.
to you just have to accept it because there are things in this world that we can't control. And we don't want to control everything. Trust me. We don't want to live day to day and have all this responsibility on our shoulders. Okay, what we want to do is make sure that each moment is for God so that when we come home from work, and we're doing the dishes, we're seeing that, I'm helping my family. It's a bigger thing. Like they say, like there's either the churches that we're building today are the LA the Los Angeles Cathedral wasn't even built by a Catholic. It was built by a Jew, I think. And how can you build something that's for Christ if you don't even believe in him in the first place? Okay, that's the problem. We need to see that everything that we do is for Christ. And if you've seen the LA Cathedral, you think it doesn't really look like a church, which is why I'm mentioning this. It's just bad. I'll be honest. Yeah, that's all I gotta say
Yeah. So good thing
before I
you
get in
answered that
trouble.
one because that was one that a lot of people were asking. They're like, "Do you have to do you have to believe and agree with every single
Yes.
thing that the church teaches and that all of it?" And because I know a
There's
lot of
one other
people.
thing I wanted to mention
Yeah. What is it? Go ahead.
before I let it go. We should be approaching the altar with the sense that we are unworthy. So all this truth that we're getting is from the church. All truth belongs to the church. If Christ is truth and Christ is the revelation, then he established the church to bind and loose those and be arbiters of the truth. And the truth owns all truth. If you're saved outside the Catholic Church, it means you're saved by a truth that was owned by the Catholic Church. Okay. So we should be approaching all this that we are unworthy. Okay. We have all these sins, we have all of our traumas, we have all these things that affect us and our fleshly things and our ego and our pride and all this stuff that we just can't seem to let go or detach from. We should be approaching it every day like we are unworthy so that when the church gives us something that is challenging that we don't understand, we don't have this ego that say like, well, that doesn't make sense. Forget all that. We have this humility to carry us that we can discover the truth.
Well, I mean, that's a very good point. I was gonna say, I'm like, I think we're learning a lot in this episode, so I really do appreciate it. I know you also have to go in a little bit. So I guess to conclude, what are some like let's
Yes.
say like five word advice that you would give to a cradle Catholic who is wanting to start taking their faith seriously? What are the main points that you're like, you gotta these are the 4 or 5 essential ones. And then where can
Okay.
we find you on social media as well?
Yeah. So I'd say number one important thing, or maybe I should say this for last because it is the most important thing, is struggle with the faith. Okay. We're not always going to be perfect. We're not always going to be, life is messy. Okay. So just let it be messy and accept the struggles and do your best to overcome the struggles. But don't forget, struggles will happen. Number two is you have to find a good priest, a good parish. A lot of times nowadays, you can find them on the internet, someone to follow who lives out a Catholic life day to day because they're going to be able to interpret things like major events, some things that everybody speaks on. They're going to be able to interpret things for you and someone who's a little bit more holier than you. Okay. And there are people who are more holy than you, believe it or not. And then number three is be active in any parish ministry. And these are just off the top of my head, some things I would need to do myself. Okay. is be active in more parish ministry and attend more Catholic conferences. The reason I am the way I am is I don't know any of this. I can't fact check or source any of my information. It's all just come from years of living out the faith, homilies, going to Catholic conferences. I grew up walking across. I grew up going to mass and then walking across to the parish hall with Chris Stefanik, with Tim Staples, with Jesse Romero, with my brother's godmother, who's has a doctorate and she's a teacher at Steubenville. Okay, so we are all learning the faith every single day. It's important that we go to these Catholic conferences that we put on. Eric's putting one on June 28th that I'll be at, and then I'm putting one on August 9th. Yes,
Okay, and then, just
and
let
then
us
what number
know.
am I on?
Yeah, whatever
I can
number
give you
you're
two
on.
more.
Yeah,
I
go
can I
ahead.
can give you two
Go
more.
ahead. Go ahead.
And then always study the faith and then participate in the sacraments. Okay, those are always the final two because when we study the faith, we're going to deepen our devotion. We're going to find new devotions. There's a Holy Wounds chaplet that I discovered, which is very, very interesting to pray. And then the last one is participate in the sacraments. Make sure you go to confession as often as possible. Confession as often as possible.
Okay, thank you. Where can we find you on social media for those who
Okay,
wanna see you?
this is confusing, but find my videos on Full Sheen Ahead and then go to vmpr.org. That's Virgin Most Powerful Radio.org to find my podcast Through His Wounds, or you can check it out on Apple Podcasts. My Instagram is Young Presbyter. A presbyter was a church elder. So I'm the young church elder because I got all this knowledge that a lot of young people don't have, and a lot of people older than me have forgotten. So I am the young presbyter. Presbyter is Presbyter. And you can check me out on Instagram. I also do Catholic rap because, again, that should be number 5, actually, after go to confession, is incorporate all of this into your life so that every single second you're meditating on Christ, which is why I
Alright.
come up with these raps.
Yeah. Also, you do Theology Thursdays with, Eric as well, so, yeah,
We're
that's
all
where
over
I
the
know you
place.
from. Yeah, you're all over the place, so, yeah, I see you a lot more. Alright, so thank you so much for doing this. I know it's a short one, I'm hoping to bring you back on soon so we can do another one because honestly, you have a lot of knowledge, and for somebody as young as you are, I think it's important to share and to hear it from somebody from your perspective. So thank you so much for being here, for taking the time to share all this with us. I appreciate it. And just, I pray that God just keeps blessing your ministry and everything that you're doing.
Thank you for your ministry. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for listening, for watching. Go ahead and check out his stuff as well. I'll be linking it down in the bio. Just have a blessed week, and I'll see you till next time.